The road stretched out like a ribbon of gray through the endless pine forests of Northern California. It was May 19, 1977, and the air smelled of warm asphalt and pine sap as a young woman walked along the highway with her thumb outstretched, hoping for a ride. She was 20 years old, a free spirit who believed she could manage herself on the road. Hitchhiking was risky, but she had done it before and believed in her ability to judge character. Her long hair whipped across her face as cars sped past, the drivers giving her quick, dismissive glances. Then a blue Dodge Colt slowed, pulling up alongside her. Inside sat a young couple with a baby in the back seat. Seeing the family put her at ease. A couple with a child couldn't be dangerous. They smiled politely, and the man asked where she was headed. She told them she was going to visit a friend in Northern California. They said they could give her a ride for part of the way. She thanked them and climbed in. The man behind the wheel seemed polite but quiet. His wife sat in the passenger seat, occasionally turning to fuss with the baby. They introduced themselves, but the names slipped past her in the easy rhythm of the ride. At first, everything felt normal, but there was a strange tension in the car. The woman barely spoke, her voice low and clipped. The driver kept glancing at the rearview mirror in short, sharp looks. She tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the landscape rolling by outside the window, the thick green of the forest broken by patches of sunlight. For a while the drive was uneventful, but as they continued north, the atmosphere began to shift. Small details stuck out to her. The way the man's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel, how the wife stared at her with a tight, uneasy smile. Something was wrong, though she couldn't place it. They stopped at a gas station. She thought of getting out, thanking them for the ride, and waiting for another car. But the man insisted on continuing, and his wife reassured her that it was fine. Against the whisper of instinct in the back of her mind, she climbed back in. The air in the car grew heavier, the silence stretching longer, the sense of unease building. Then, when they were far from any town or witness, the driver pulled over on a desolate stretch of road. He got out, opened the trunk, and retrieved a large wooden box. He ordered her to stay still. Before she could process what was happening, the wife turned around and aimed a weapon at her. Shock froze her in place. She thought of running, but the baby in the back seat disoriented her, her survival instinct clashing with disbelief. The man held up the box. It was heavy, lined inside with padding, fitted with air holes, but built to seal completely. Her chest tightened as he forced it over her head, plunging her into darkness. The world disappeared. Inside the box, sound was muffled, her breathing loud against the padded walls. Panic surged through her chest as she realized she couldn't move. The box was locked around her head and shoulders, reducing her world to suffocating heat and darkness. She could hear the baby crying faintly, the muffled voices of the couple outside, the car door slamming shut. Then the vehicle started moving again. Minutes bled into hours. She fought to stay calm, to count the seconds, to remind herself she would be missed if she didn't show up to her friend's house. But the reality pressed in. She was trapped with strangers who had carefully prepared for this. The ride stretched endless. Every bump in the road rattled her bones. Every curve in the highway shifted her balance within the box. Heat built until sweat poured down her face, dripping into her collar. Time lost meaning. Finally the car slowed, gravel crunching under the tire. The box was lifted and carried into an unfamiliar space. When it was finally removed, the dim light of a basement flooded her eyes. Her captors stood over her, the man with his cold eyes and rigid posture, the woman clutching the baby with a blank expression. They led her down narrow steps into a cellar, the air damp and smelling of earth. In the corner of the basement was a crude wooden frame, shackles and chains. She realized with horror that this place had been prepared long before she entered their car. They locked her in the basement, chaining her to a device that restricted her movements. Days blurred together. At first, she hoped this was temporary, that they would release her once they calmed down. But each day that passed made it clear she was not going anywhere. The man asserted control in every way, speaking in a calm but menacing tone, describing rules she had to follow. He told her he belonged to a powerful organization, a secret company that controlled her fate. If she resisted, he said, the company would kill her family. He described brutal punishments for disobedience, conditioning her with fear until every word sounded like truth. She tried to resist, but the psychological terror wore her down. The wife was complicit, watching silently, sometimes helping, always present. Even the baby became part of the deception, a reminder of the strange family unit she was now trapped within. Weeks became months. He built a coffin-like box beneath their bed, a wooden enclosure just large enough to fit her body curled inside. The space was stifling, barely breathable, and he forced her to stay inside for hours, then days, until she lost all sense of time. She listened to footsteps above her, muffled conversations, the creak of the bed frame as the couple lay above. The box became her world, a coffin in which she was both dead and alive. She learned to stay silent, to conserve breath, to accept the suffocating heat and darkness. When he opened the box, it felt like light itself was a cruel weapon against her eyes. Over years, the rules expanded. She was forced to sign a contract, declaring herself his slave, surrendering her life, and even her right to exist to him. He presented it as binding law, evidence of the company's control. Fear of retribution kept her from running, even when she was allowed outside. Sometimes he tested her by giving her brief moments of freedom, only to remind her that the company was watching. Once he took her to visit her own family. She sat in her parents' home, chained by invisible fear. They noticed her gaunt appearance, her distant eyes, but she said nothing. She was convinced that if she spoke out, the company would kill them all. After the visit, she was returned to captivity without protest. Her silence was as binding as any chain. The years passed in cycles of confinement, manipulation, and fleeting illusions of normalcy. She was permitted to do chores, to clean the house, to care for the children that came later, but always under his control. The wife remained silent, bound in her own way, enabling his dominance. To the outside world, the family appeared ordinary, but beneath their roof lay a nightmare hidden in plain sight. For 7 years, she lived this way, believing herself trapped by forces beyond her control. The wooden box remained the central symbol of her existence, her prison beneath their bed, her world reduced to darkness and silence. Eventually, cracks began to appear in his control. The wife grew weary, the strain of their secret life pulling at her conscience. Whispers of doubt reached the captive. She began to see the man not as an all-powerful figure, but as a deluded tyrant. The company was a fabrication, a lie designed to keep her compliant. Slowly, her mind began to resist. She tested boundaries, pushing for small freedoms. He allowed her to get a job, to interact with people outside, convinced she was too broken to ever reveal the truth. But the taste of freedom rekindled her will. Step by step, she began to imagine escape. The final break came years later, when the wife finally admitted the truth. There was no company. It had all been a manipulation, a cruel invention to control her. The weight of that revelation shattered the psychological chains that had bound her for years. Terror gave way to rage, and then to resolve. She contacted authorities, her voice trembling but firm as she recounted everything. The abduction, the basement, the box beneath the bed. Investigators listened in disbelief as she described years of captivity in suburban plain sight. When police entered the home, they found the evidence exactly as she described. The box was there, the contracts, the crude devices of restraint. Every detail testified to her endurance, her survival in conditions most could not imagine. The man was arrested, his wife testifying against him. The trial revealed the depths of his cruelty and manipulation, the calculated design of his lies. He was sentenced to life, his control over her broken forever. The wife, though complicit, cooperated with prosecutors and served a reduced sentence. The captive was finally free, though freedom itself was another challenge. After 7 years in a box, the world was too bright, too loud, too vast. It took time to learn to trust, to live without fear of an invisible company watching her every move. Her story remains one of the most harrowing tales of captivity in modern history. A young woman, kidnapped on a highway, held for 7 years under the bed of her captors, surviving through darkness, manipulation, and silence. She became known to the world as the girl in the box, a name that reduced her suffering to a single chilling image, but also captured the unimaginable horror of her experience. Her endurance, her ability to emerge alive from years of psychological and physical imprisonment, is a testament to the human will to survive. But the echo of her story lingers in every empty stretch of highway, every ride accepted from a stranger, every moment when instinct whispers that something isn't right. It is a story of fear, of control, and ultimately of survival in the face of a nightmare that defies comprehension.